6:30, and call the Ashland Planning Board meeting for June 26, 2025 to order. Decided on each side is John Thomas and John Harville. Because of members not present tonight, they will be elevated up to full voting members. Okay?
John Thomas and John
Harville.
Hartwell. Okay.
And if we could all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Andy Fitch.
Present.
Linda Barnes.
Present.
John Harville.
Present.
John Thomas. Present. And I am Kendall Hughes. I am present. Absent with notice is Trish Harris, Donna Laturdo, and Bethany France. We will not be discussing Mill Pond tonight, just so everyone knows. We have a lot of other stuff that is also very important that we will be discussing. First, we're going to do the June 5th minutes. I'll take a moment to review them. I'm sorry, Thursday, May 1st, 2025 minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve as written.
I have a motion to approve. Either Linda or John, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on them?
No, just thanks to whoever put them together.
All those in favor of the minutes say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstaining. Okay, motion passes. The June 5th minutes are still being finished. We will have those shortly for our next meeting. Okay. New business. Mill Pond Development application has requested a continuance of the hearing to July 17th, 2025. At which time they will also be answering the public questions which were given from the walkthrough. Do I have a motion to continue their public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion, a second. Motion by Andy, second by Linda. Continue the public hearing. All those in favor, or any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion opposed. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that will be it for Mill Pond tonight. Jeannie Angel is going to do a presentation to us on workforce housing that she has been putting together in the housing situation that the town finds itself currently in.
Miss Angel, could you just spell your first name?
Jenny, Jennie.
Angel.
Angel, A-N-G-E-L-L.
Thank you.
Well, to set this record straight, it's workforce housing and how Mill Pond, so there is Mill Pond information.
Right, but this is really about the conditions of the housing in Ashland.
A little bit?
Yep.
Okay. Great. And I have some copies there. I think most people, if Don, you might want something. And where we start with workforce housing, and thank you all for coming. is,
And just for clarification, the real reason that we're doing this is for the master plan and for developing the zoning ordinances going forward.
good. Okay. Thank you for the news. Very good. Okay. I'm going to start though with the village of Mill Pond is being developed as workforce housing. Now, there was a big thing on their website where they went through, no, it's not, no, it's not. But what I do have, and if you look, what I've passed out, anything I'm showing, you'll find copies of it. They put this at work, that Mill Pond is 76 units of workforce rental housing located on Mill Pond. So they're describing it, and I got this brochure on March 23rd. And then their website came up with something different 3 days later. But this is when I got this. So that's what we're talking about, workforce housing. Now the question is, what is workforce housing? And it's kind of a generic term for a lot of different things. It can be affordable housing, and what affordable housing is, it's considered affordable if it doesn't cost more than 30% of your gross income. There's workforce housing, and with I see a copy of the New Hampshire RSA that describes it, and some of it is 30% of certain types of, for rentals, and it could be 30% of 100% of the average medium income. It depends on where you are, but there's an actual New Hampshire statute on that. And then also with affordable housing, there might be HUD housing, that's housing and urban and development, and that's where there is, the housing is based on your income, and so the development that takes HUD housing might get less revenue than they would if they didn't do HUD housing, but there are other programs to sort of make them whole, and I'll talk about them and why sometimes that's a problem for the community. And then we have affordable senior housing, and we have some of that here. We have the Common Man Senior Housing up on West Street, which is a nice facility. What people might know, that they actually do get a subsidy in that they do not pay any of the school tax on their property tax. It's, they are a nonprofit. They could come and say, we're not going to pay any taxes. They're not doing that, but what the agreement is they don't pay the school portion. So that becomes kind of like a subsidy, but it's for the seniors who are on lower income, and the town made the deal with them, and that's what we're doing. So,
And that's part of our affordable housing project.
all of this comes under affordable housing. There isn't any one, affordable housing is not a very specifically defined term. All of these different things come under affordable housing. Now in New Hampshire, this is case law, they're very specific, and I'm going to read this to you, and it's in what I passed out. And this was a New Hampshire Supreme Court case, and what they said is every municipality must provide, it says every municipality, and municipality also includes towns, must provide a reasonable and realistic opportunity for development of affordable housing. The court also reiterated that the regional needs surrounding communities are relevant. So what we need, Holderness needs, because we're neighbors and we serve the same community. So the court, okay, the regional needs of surrounding communities are relevant and required communities in New Hampshire to provide proportionate or fair share of affordable housing. So I will show that Ashland is providing more than its fair share of affordable housing, and then describe why some of these programs are really detrimental to the financial health of the community. So the next part says the people in Ashland are providing their more than their fair share. In Grafton County, and I'll go over why I did all of Grafton County, we are providing, okay, great. I broke my glasses last week, so I'm on my spare glasses, so I'm a little slow, sorry. Ashland is providing subsidized HUD housing to 3.2% of our residents, while we are only 2.1% of the Grafton County population. So we are providing more HUD housing for our residents proportionally than a fair share for Grafton County. And if you look at this, sheet that's on there, this is all of the communities in Grafton County. And what you will see is, you'll see all of the communities that are actually providing housing has numbers on in the columns on the right. And all of those that are totally blank on the right are not providing any HUD housing. And if you look, I also color coded, I have some color coding in the back. And let's see. And things to notice on here. Ashland has the highest percentage of people living below the poverty line in Grafton County. And they are second in the state. And you can see that, that's right up in the bullet, the top bullet, because we're at 24.7%. So then, one thing that's interesting is Holderness, which is a town that has more population than we do, doesn't have any. None of the abutting communities around Ashland have any HUD housing. And then I went to the Lakes Regional District because they're a different group, and see where we are with Lakes Region. And Lakes Region has a total population of 125,000. We have 1,964. We are 1.5% of the total population in Lakes Region, but we are providing 4.23% of the restricted income housing. That includes,
When you
yes.
say Lakes Region, you mean Lakes Region Planning Commission, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Just for clarification, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I have.
Which is the planning commission that we are a part of.
Lakes Region, right, and I have a list here with
Yep.
all of the communities, yes, yes.
Just for clarification.
Okay, so we have 1.57% of the population, but we are providing 4.23% of income restrictive housing, which means you make less and they charge you less. So it's lower income housing.
You said 4.3%?
4.23. And I can give you a copy of all this after,
Okay.
if that would help. Okay, easy. Okay. So going back to with Ashland having the highest people living below the poverty line, obviously we are providing a lot of low-income housing because they wouldn't be here if our housing costs were high. Some of these are Ledgewood or Amesbrook, but we also have a lot of smaller landlords who have broken up large houses who are providing housing for some of these lower income people. So we are providing the housing. And I will say Ashland as a community has embraced all these people who live here. We've got Anne Marie with the Parks Department works real hard for getting donations so all the kids can go to camp and the kids can go to their sports teams and stuff. And the church here does a lot of work with all of the locals. So the community has embraced everybody who lives here. We're not trying to push anybody out.
When you said Amesbrook, were you referring to Dogget Campground?
No, I'm sorry, Amesbrook Development, Amesbrook Apartment. Okay,
Amesbrook Apartments, which is all-
Ledgewood is now Amesbrook, it's,
Okay,
it's,
different than the campground.
yes.
Correct. It used to be Hodge Estates, and it was Ledgewood.
Origin, now it's
Then it
Ames,
was
yes.
Harvey, now it's called Amesbrook.
Right, it's not a campground, yes. Okay, so one of the things you look at is since we have such a large population who is living below the poverty line, you think, okay, let's putting in affordable housing, subsidized housing, whatever you want to call it, seems like a no-brainer because we have people who have needs. But how this works, the developer works out a deal where they are only going to be on some, there are all these different programs, but one of the big programs is, and this is what Amesbrook is they develop a program and they work with the state, and they, instead of charging market rate or whatever they can, the rents are based on the tenant's ability to pay sometimes. That's what some of, you know, and then there are a lot of, it's pretty amazing, there are a lot of, if they're doing this, they can get tax credits, but it's a nonprofit, but then they can sell the tax credits and get the revenue. So it's an amazing thing, which is fine. But one of the things that they do is, since they are lowering the rates, so because for the low income, they work with the state, and the state develops a capitalization rate by county. That's why one of my charts is by county. We're in Grafton County. And then once a year, they set what the rate is, and they do not pay the full share of taxes like you do. And if you look at one of the sheets that I have on here, on the handouts, you will see, there's one that says, it's one that's got Amesbrook on it. Looks like this. And what this is, the state works out the deal with this property owner, and so Amesbrook pays $42,000 a year in property taxes for that apartment complex. That's what they pay.
How many people do they have in the school system?
I have no idea.
Well, how many?
There are a total of 40 apartments there. There are 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. I don't know the
So
exact
you
number of
figure it
I
people living
think
there.
they average 1.5 to 2.5 kids per apartment.
That's a state average, but yes.
Something like that. I'm not sure
Yeah.
the subsidized, but that's a state average.
Yeah, so they're paying $42,000. Now, I have heard for Mill Pond, I've heard as low as 38, I've heard 55. They're gonna have, yes,
Without Mill Pond being here, we're not allowed to discuss Mill Pond in any way.
We're not discussing Mill Pond. We are discussing the
housing.
housing crisis in New Hampshire. But we are limiting anything we say about Mill Pond.
Okay, all right.
We can discuss how much it's costing us to have Amesbrook.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes.
So if Amesbrook had 40 units of two people in the school system each, that would be 80 students times what, $25,000 a student? Would that be in the ballpark?
I believe it's a little bit more than that, but yes.
So what happened, yes, so you can kind of do the math in your head. So what happens is, okay, this is a great thing to keep, and I am all for quality housing for everybody. And this is all has to, and I've talked to Peter Levitt about this, and it's like, the legislation that's in place is flawed, and that ideally, if we could somehow get it changed. But what happens is, so Amesbrook's only paying so much in taxes. Well, the expenses are still there. It's average, it costs about $4,000 a person in town. So, you know, 4,000 times the number of people, that's what our budget is. Now, some of these are fixed costs, so every incremental person is in another 4,000, but there is money there. And so since Amesbrook is not paying its full tax bill, that is then has to be spread out to everybody else. So, like there was this couple I talked to right after I got elected. My sign was in the yard, and I didn't even know who they were. And but they're an elderly couple. They live in one of these houses that we see all over town. It's like a story and a half with the front porch. I think they were Sears houses, but you see a lot of them. and their grandchildren or great-grandchildren were playing out in the street, and they're going, we don't know what we're gonna do. We can't afford, if our taxes go up anymore, we're gonna have to leave and we have no place to go. And I'm guessing they could be living on $25,000 in Social Security. I looked up their house, their tax bill is over $4,000, and with the stuff, it could go up to $4,500 and stuff, and they can't afford this. The other thing you look at, you've got the smaller landlords that have, the apartments that a lot of people in town live in. They have to make a certain amount of money to pay their bills. And so if their taxes are going to go up, they either have to raise their rent, reduce the amount of maintenance, or both. So what happens is these developments using these programs are being partially financed by people who are living below the poverty line. That's what's happening. And so
one of the ways to fix that for us is doing impact fees to an extent.
maybe impact fees, yes.
So that is one of the reasons why we are looking at impact fees, so that future development will be offset on some of the costs by that. Sir?
The problem with impact fees is you have to use it for capital needs as it relates to that development. So part of the problems I was running into when I was asking for impact fees was having to justify using that money for that growth.
Right. So
Okay.
it can be used for capital improvements. It can also be used through the capital improvements program of the community, which we are in the process of developing, which would be like if we had to add additional police officers or firefighters or EMTs, highway people, and the equipment that is used to support them and what they do.
Yeah.
Which is a major
Yeah.
contributor to the taxes.
Yeah.
But then you're gonna get all that information together.
Yes, you do, and we are working on doing that. Yeah.
Okay, so my point is the developments for affordable housing, or whether it's HUD housing or whatever it is, I actually had a discussion with someone from the Department of Economics in the state. And I won't tell you his name because because I was going through trying to figure out how this cap rate works. Do I really get it? And do I understand it? And they adjust the assessment down because whatever. He says, yes, you've got it right. And I said, well, when I look at this and I look at a town like Ashland, in doing this, what it ultimately actually does is they put it in a town that is distressed, financially distressed. And what it does is it makes a poor town poorer. And the gentleman goes and says, I've been here a long time. Yes, if the community is really financially distressed, yes, that's what it does. But that's my opinion. That's not necessarily the opinion of the people who are above me. But that's what this person's opinion was. So until we get jobs here, because Freudenberg's done, we are losing more.
Yes.
And we bring people in here who may not have cars. There's no place for them to work. And I will say in all my research here on this, Ashland does not have a high unemployment rate. People are working. People are working hard. They're just not making a lot of money. And so, but as far as housing goes, putting in the Amesbrook kind of housing with these kinds of, they are subsidies. We're subsidizing it, you're subsidizing it, kind of stuff. And we want to do this for our people who live here, but it needs to be an affordable way. And what happens, okay, none of our abutting communities have any of this housing.
Why is that?
They're good at keeping it out. The land is too expensive for the builders to build.
A lot of it also has to do with our zoning rules and regulations. That's why we're looking at them to make sure that they are correct and what the town wants. That's part of the master plan thing, which leads into the zoning ordinance, so that we get what the people want for a vision of the community moving forward for the next 10 years.
And if I look across the cove for my house, and if I moved my house across the cove, my taxes would be 40% of what they are now.
Which your house will be worth a lot more. Sure.
Possibly, yes, 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 the taxes are depressing, but yes. But that's,
Well, Ashland is one of the higher tax communities in Grafton County, so not necessarily.
Well, the values are higher.
the values are,
No, not necessarily. Let's take Bridgewater, for example. A house in Bridgewater compared to a house in Holderness compared to
She
a
was
house.
talking across the cove from her house, which is Holderness.
Right. But what I'm saying is, if you're looking at the surrounding communities that we are around, the property values are not greatly one way or the other. On the lake, that is a totally different story.
but it is just one of these, they do not have any, they don't even have senior housing, kind of thing, which,
Correct.
a lot of the towns we were listening, that most of it is elderly supportive housing, but they don't even have that. And
Is there a state requirement, a percentage of population in each town that?
yes, no, not every, but it's goes at every, as the it's stated in, we have an obligation. We have an obligation to do a proportionate amount.
So as the court decided in Burton versus Chester, which is in this
Yeah.
document you got, each town it must have its proportionate or fair share of affordable housing.
Yes. That's what was ruled. But somehow they're better at keeping it out, or
Yep.
not providing it. And this document is out there, and there's a link on one of my tables. If you want to look at there's a lot of information on Lakes Region housing.
I think we've been vulnerable because of the way our zoning laws are. We've tried to be builder friendly, but it's bitten us pretty hard. I know in Plymouth, they limited it to 6 units per building or per lot there, and it would require a variance to get more than that in it. And that was sort of Plymouth's way to keep something big from coming in. Yet they do carry, a good portion with the Plymouth apartments there. I've seen in Holderness where they called things seasonal, and they were very restrictive on allowing somebody to claim year-round residency or even register a car in Holderness when they don't have year-round residency. Yet, and when I first came to Ashland, I liked that I came here, and I had the 85 Main Street property that Bob Merrill had next to Buskey's, right next door here. And I was able to add 2 more apartments back before square footage went higher than 500 square feet per apartment. But renting in Ashland for many, many years to different tenants, I found a great need for affordable housing, and people were very happy to be in a 500 square foot apartment if they could afford it. They just appreciated that they could afford their apartment. In a way, we do provide additional non-subsidized housing, but affordable housing by having, our Washington Street and our, Mill Street and all these places that had built into apartment buildings. So even beyond what we have as, funded affordable housing, we've got a lot of apartment buildings, and you were saying that too.
That's what I was saying, the people are here, they're living someplace.
And the free market's working with it, plus we have that, and my gosh, our tax rate, are we the 4th highest in the state, or some not
I
far
don't know
from
if we're
it?
all that high, I mean,
But,
it's just,
I know it's up there though.
How much of that has to do with we're a small population, and so when these added costs come up, there are fewer people to cover those costs, and that sort of is kind of a rock and a hard place.
What you're applying in the tables, the larger the population, the more likely they are to have, your cities have it, and they do bear a greater proportion. But so you're getting down to the communities our size, but there are a number of communities that are larger than us that are not doing any share. And so it's one of these things that it's not, the way the structure is set up with the state, it's not shared with everybody.
Yeah, and so my question in terms of tax rates was because of the economic base of our town and the very small population.
Yes, it hurts.
So it hurts more because there are fewer people who carry the burden of the taxes. So if you have these other factors that...
And no commercial. Really, the losing the commercial is huge because they would pick up a lot of this in your cities where you have more commercial. They pick up this, and we don't have that, and we're losing more of it.
So,
Any questions?
this is an excellent, amazing draft. I just want to say you did an amazing job on that. It explains a lot. Everyone who gets a chance to look at the colored graph, it's really good.
Thanks for doing all
Jenny,
that
this is
research.
great.
So if you have any questions, this isn't exactly how I thought this we were originally on Mill Pond, so.
Yeah. No, we're good. It's just they backed up. This is information which we need for the master plan. You guys have heard it, please digest it, and then we're gonna ask you to give us feedback. So what you think. It's gonna help us to develop. We're gonna have a charrette coming up in the late fall. I need you all to come to that. And that's gonna determine where Ashland goes, what our vision for Ashland will be for the next 10 years. So.
Have they paid the application fee for the charrette from
We
the last time?
are in the process of doing that. We're getting a grant to do that.
Okay, do we have money? Do you have money for that?
We do. So Jane Sawyer, our land use secretary, has been working very hard to become what is called a housing champion, to make Ashland a housing champion. A lot of that has to do with the education that the board takes and everything in land use stuff. We've done all of that. We've crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. The application has been sent in. We've got a positive response back from it. We're waiting for the final grading. Once that's done, we'll be awarded some money to go ahead and pay for the shred itself. But we are on the table to do it. Yep. Any other questions?
I just think if we're looking for ways to keep from being abused as a town, we should look at what other towns have done and what's been effective and talk with the town planners of different communities for ideas. I mean, obviously we can see what Plymouth's done and we can see some things Holderness has, but this is something that a lot of communities are doing, and not reinventing the wheel makes a lot of sense.
So the planning board is actually doing that. We are looking at other towns' zoning ordinances, we're looking at our zoning ordinances, and we're going through them in a pathway.
This site, the sites we have here could be vulnerable. The mill sites that we have there could be, and it's important to watch how it impacts us and that we're bringing in the right things, and that's great. Thanks for working on that.
And they're also working with the Economic Development Committee as well. They're working on a section of the master plan now that they're going to present to us so that we'll be ready to bring that to the shred. Right?
Right.
All right, if no one has any questions, we will move on to the next thing.
I have one question. Can I get his name from the group?
Dawn, she needs your name and
Name?
Donald Stope,
Okay,
85 Level Hill Road.
thank you.
okay, the next thing will be Linda Barnes, a presentation on a online business directory.
And I made copies of a draft proposal. We may not have time to really do much work with it, but the basic idea was that, just it's 2 pages each. How could we create a sort of online yellow pages for businesses here in town? Not only the brick and mortar sites, but there are lots of people doing home businesses. And is there a way to help support them, grow their customer base by creating, you know, it would be opt-in, it would be voluntary, people don't have to ask to have a listing. But could we come up with something like, how many of you remember the old yellow pages, you know, where there was a section with categories and then there were the white pages at the beginning where it was just all alphabetical? Well, something like that. So for example, I breed dogs. So under the white pages, you know, be the name of the dog breeding, and then in the yellow pages, you know, maybe there'd be a category for dog breeders. I don't know how many of us there would be under that, but there are other people who are doing things out of their homes, trying to make extra money, don't necessarily have the money or at this point the other wherewithal to set up something out of a storefront. But at the same time, I assume they're hoping to grow their customer base. So could we create a questionnaire that would go out and allow people to say, okay, I'd like to have a listing, and the proposal is that, you know, we come up with some way for it to be self-supporting so that we're not trying to ask taxpayers to fund it. But maybe, you know, I don't know, I'm just throwing out a number and I don't know if this is what it would come to. But once we figure out what would it cost, and this would be after this board, oh, that was recycled paper. And we're also working with the Economic Development Committee, and Jen and I are sort of pooling our thoughts on this, and then, you know, presumably there'd be input from the town and it would go before the select board. So this isn't going to happen overnight, but could we find a way to reach out to people in the town to say, if you would like to have a listing, fill out this questionnaire. Be like, you know, what's your business name? If you need any state permits, do you have them? Do you have a permit from the planning board? Because any business that is out of someone's home, it's known as home occupation, needs to just submit a short proposal to the planning board. It's free. Happy to work with people to kind of help them if they need help developing the proposal. Come before the planning board. We can work with people to help them refine the proposal. In other words, how can we support these different efforts that people are already doing so that we have a better understanding of all the businesses in town, and to make them that information available to other people in the town so that we can support members of our community who are trying to build home businesses and brick and mortar businesses. So that's sort of the general concept. And so what I've tried to lay out is sort of what the purpose is, to help bring our businesses to the attention of town residents as well as to potential customers from surrounding towns, helping these businesses grow their customer bases, and providing it would also help with the town's Economic Development Committee get a better sense of what is really everything here contributing to the town economy. So as far as the planning that's happening with the Economic Development Committee, support that, and would also support our work as a planning board in building the master plan, to have a more accurate idea of what is actually going on in Ashland. Needs to be more than, you know, in addition to being the name of a Facebook page, it kind of needs to be informing, you know, the different committees and boards that are trying to help grow the town's economy. And then I've sort of laid out some thoughts of how people might register for it and ways to get the word out. Again, this would all need to be brainstormed and run through the select board. And then there are questions I had that as I was laying out this draft, I have no idea how to answer. Like, you know, what are the different steps for even getting this approved? Is it something that would be on the town website, would it be separate? I would like to see it as integrated into sort of the town in a way that it sort of clearly has town blessing, but that's gonna take discussion and careful thought, because this would not be a case of the town endorsing any particular businesses. I think that's really important. If somebody chooses not to have a listing, they shouldn't feel that somehow the town is on the side of people who do have a listing and not supporting people who choose not to. So I think all of that has to be thought through really carefully so people feel that it's fair, that they can join in if they want to, and that they're supported in doing so. And, you know, I'm willing to volunteer to sort of do this, provided I get lots of advice and input from everybody else so I don't put my foot in it. Are there any restrictions on who can have a listing? You know, and it needs to be businesses that are here in Ashland. This is not for people in Plymouth or Holderness or New Hampton to say, gee, I'd like to advertise to the people, you know, in Ashland. This is for Ashland businesses, and then people from these other towns are welcome to come, but it's not to advertise businesses outside of Ashland. And then, you know, other things we need to figure out is how to keep the listings up to date, because there's nothing so frustrating in you know, hearing that there's a business here in town and you go and look and it's closed and the listings don't reflect that. So that's sort of broad strokes, and it may be too soon to sort of review these kinds of questions. Jen and I are going to get together and discuss them further, but you know, love to hear thoughts on the idea.
My experience with what you're talking about is what they do in Manchester, which is much larger.
Yeah.
And they have an economic development for what they have the town, they have the city website, like we have a website that's being upgraded and all that stuff. And they were listed, in economic development, it was an actual department, it was listed on the website by all the departments with whatever, but then they had a link, so they had their own site. I'm not saying this is what we should do, I'm just telling you what I'm interested in. So it's a separate site, but what they did on that site is they added any large buildings, commercial buildings, whatever, they would have the listing with the real estate company, so anybody looking. So they were looking at for the bigger things, not the smaller, because this is much smaller. But that is what they did. They were promoting Manchester, promoting economic opportunities for businesses for locations or different things that had gone on in the city for that. But it was, you could get to it from the city website, but then it was a separate site, so it wasn't on the city's direct site.
So it's sort of both and.
Pardon me?
So it's sort of both and.
Right,
you know.
right, so it had its own URL, so you can get to it from the city site, but it also had its own URL. And it was, the city was directly not the leaders. If it's a department, the city is responsible for it.
Yeah, right.
It was not the rest of the regular city business stuff. It was really kind of it was used as a marketing tool, which, you know, town and city websites don't do that, but this was a marketing tool to market and promote business and economic development within the city. So it was really a marketing tool.
Which was my hope, that it would
Right.
serve to help businesses larger and then very small get marketing, because smaller home-based businesses generally don't have a big marketing budget.
So do we have any web designers who live in town?
Well, that guy that works with JD Designs, their son is a computer guru. He's really good.
Well, they're gurus and they're web designers, they're not necessarily.
But I know, I'm trying to think of what his name is, but he could, Steve.
I've
Yeah,
done
he could.
multiple web designs for different, both academic and our own businesses, so I'm happy to at least rough things out.
Rough things out,
Input from people,
yeah.
sure.
He might be a good person to contact and talk to. Steve?
Stephen.
Yeah, Stephen, what's the last name?
Yeah,
Lamos.
Wamos, wait,
Lamos,
Is that Lamos?
yeah.
JD Designs, I'll tell you in just a moment, I've got it in
Yeah,
my,
that's his mom.
yeah, but he's the same last name,
Lamos.
J. Demers, Lamos, yes.
And he's reasonable because he's young and he's just starting out.
And he's very reasonable in what he charges, I mean, I need that guy on my team, you know, he's really good.
So one of the reasons that we really want to do this is all businesses that come before, move into the town of Ashland are supposed to come before the planning board, so that we know the hearing and we know that they go before the building inspector and the fire chief for those things, and that they get required state permits. We found out that there were 3 different businesses that we weren't aware of at the marina. Yeah, they're all fine and everything, but it would be nice to have a directory and help them as well as it helps us. And that was really a driving force for why we were looking at doing this. Yes,
Is there any different requirements for somebody that's working out of their home with a home business versus somebody that's got a business?
yes.
So
The
it's
zoning
different.
ordinance does require some specific things for a home occupation, and it's specifically listed as home occupation.
But they still need to go before the board.
Still need to come before the planning board.
But one of the big distinctions for a home occupation is the amount of space in someone's property that it takes up. So like it can't be more than a relatively smaller percentage, so that it isn't like I live in one quarter and all the rest is a business.
Right.
It's clearly still a residence, it's just you're running a small business out of your home. So that's the kind of thing that, one of the things that the permit says, like what percentage of your square footage is taken up by the business, and sort of what's the nature of the business, and does it require any state licenses, and if so, do you have them? And all that. But it's, when you think of what is a home business, it comes under that category.
So this could, sorry, I live here too, I just have a question. So this could potentially shut down some of their home businesses.
No, because nobody has to, somebody can keep going under the radar if they choose to. Okay, so this is, in other words, not trying to
Not
hunt
for the
people
zoning,
down.
they can't.
Pardon?
Not for the zoning, they can't.
Well, no, technically they can't. And, by zoning ordinance, they can't. We may not know about them.
So if I may, home occupation is 4.7 of the zoning ordinance. A home occupation is any use that is customary conducted entirely within a dwelling by an inhabitant, therefore, and the use of a portion of the dwelling or a portion of an accessory building must be clearly secondary and incidental to the said dwelling and subordinate to the primary use on the premise of the residence. It must not change the character of the building or the character of the neighborhood. There is no outward appearance of such occupation within the exception of one permitted. Amended March 10th, 2020. It goes on to discuss, but there's no additional signage. They can't have additional signage. No neon lights, anything. Storage of goods and materials must be allowed within the primary structure or accessory dwelling. There can be no exterior storage of their stuff. Traffic, other than employees, cannot be between the hours of 8 p.m. and 7 a.m. It shall not cause a nuisance, noise, radio interference, vibration, sound to other people in the neighborhood. No separate entrance shall be created for home occupation. No more than 25% of a combined floor space of the occupied dwelling and or accessory building shall be devoted to the home occupation. That would be the biggest stipulation. So, and it continues on. After that, we're getting into bed and breakfasts.
So the portion that says about having outside, having things outside, storage outside. When a neighbor has decided they're a mechanic and they've got 1 million broken down trucks in their yard, are you as the zoning officials?
Actually, that comes under the junk ordinance, which is a separate ordinance that the building inspector, code enforcement officer has to do. And there's a specific number of vehicles registered or not registered.
So if there's
You bet.
the equivalent of a junkyard, there is an ordinance that sort of protects you from having to let that continue.
So if I was a home business, and I'm not, but if I'm a home business, I just applied to the planning board. And then does that require fire department coming in and all of that kind of
Depending on
stuff too?
what the business is, it may require a
Say it
visit.
was just some computer business, you know.
That probably does not.
Yeah, so.
The building inspector may have to, and if the building inspector feels that the fire department needs to come in and do a life safety inspection for it, that's what would trigger it.
And to the question of would it shut people down, I mean, right now, we don't know how many businesses that may be operating that are already in violation of zoning. And if we don't know about them, there's not much we can do about it. But for those who are interested in expanding and gaining more customers, this is sort of a pathway to support their doing that.
We're not, the intention is not to shut anybody down. It's to make sure that everyone is doing it in a safe and legal manner. So if you had a food, if you were doing food, do you fall under the new Homestead Act? Do you not fall under that? Either way, do you have your safe food handling certificate? Which is not hard to get, but it's a great thing to get. And if there was something that happened, it protects the person. So.
Also with food, there's a lot of like state laws and order.
There are. The new
that
Homestead
needs
Law Act that was passed last year curtails a lot of the state rules and regulations unless it's something that has to be refrigerated. So if you were like making bread and you were covering it with a cream cheese covering that would have to be refrigerated, then it falls under the state of New Hampshire and they have to come and inspect and do all this testing.
There's a lot to it.
Right, if you're just making bread, but only the ingredients are refrigerated, not the final product, then it does not have to be inspected by the state of New Hampshire. They do not come and do an inspection, as of the change in the law last year of the Homestead Act.
Oh, I thought you had to have a commercial space.
Right.
in order to-
Up until last year, you did, but when the legislature passed the Homestead law, that changed that.
Oh,
And a lot of us did not realize that.
oh.
Yep.
That's interesting, because, I mean, you should, you know, I'm like old school, you should be able to, you know.
Yeah, and you can.
I didn't have, yeah, but I
But when you
had,
start selling stuff to people, certain things have to be adhered to.
yeah, yeah. I had a home-based business that the town let me have, but they said, oh, well, it's just gonna be, you know, temporary,
Mhm.
which I didn't, but anyway, so I was thankful for that time,
Mhm.
that it gave me enough time to find another location.
Right.
So if somebody's, I mean, these days, a lot of people work from home, but they're working for another company.
Right.
They
Home
just-
office does not
That's not-
count as a home occupation.
Okay.
However, that is something that we may just, you know, if the town wants us to, and Ms. Charette will tell us, if that's something that we do need to start looking at, because when these ordinances were done, that was not a thing like it is now. So it is something to start thinking about that, honestly, I don't think any of us have thought about.
And the idea, again, is not to go out looking to shut people down. It's the opposite.
My initial impression when I listened is that, you know, the old saying, I'm from the FAA and I'm here to help, it's sort of, it's like you see the FAA, you're in trouble. And in a certain way, the town government promoting them is a positive thing, but when they see it under the promotion under the guise of more regulation, people are less likely to be supportive and involved.
Right.
I certainly love to see our social media page, you know, I'm from Ashland, I remember when and that type of thing. And just this week, we had out-of-town landowner that was looking for a local painter to paint his house. And our snowmobile club, you know, involved in that, I put in a post on a local page to try to find who paints around Ashland. And I got 5 people suggested from different people.
Right.
Oh, he did a great job for me. And in that sense, having a page for the community that is somebody's monitoring to keep it from becoming a scam page or something
Right.
like that.
Oh, yeah.
But
There've been a lot of
otherwise,
those,
it's
too.
promoting. But building the page is so easy now that the computer can generate its own page. You
Yeah.
just need somebody to give it the prompts to build it and get people excited about maintaining, you know, their listing on the page.
And if you go to a lot of different towns, they're doing the same thing that we're proposing to do. It's actually very common, it's very pro-community, and that's kind of what we're trying to do. Working with the Economic Development Committee, and ultimately with the selectmen will have to make the decision.
And so my real point is, I think we should promote them, and I think we should watch them what we're doing, but we shouldn't package it together too much, or people will see it as, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Fake Reddit, yeah.
Right.
The last couple, well, things don't run themselves, so somebody has to coordinate and make sure people are following the rules. And we do have our new town manager here tonight, and is this something that we would want that office to oversee?
Well, that will be ultimately up to the Board of Selectmen to decide. Our initial thought, I believe, was because the planning board has it in their rules that was adopted many years ago, that we have to keep a record of all the businesses, and we've not been doing a very good job of that, that we would, at least to start with, it's another thing that we'd put on Jane's plate. But if the selectmen and the new town manager would like to take it over, we're more than happy to allow that, I believe.
Well, and again, I'm very willing to volunteer to kind of do questionnaires and create it.
It is hard for continuity with, you know, when it's volunteers. Volunteers are wonderful.
But to get it started, I think that Linda and Jane working together would probably be a good choice, at least to get it started. And then once it's all done and ready, we could hand it off to whoever, provided the Board of Selectmen's okay with that.
Yeah, once it's all done.
Once we've gotten to a point where we can hand it off, if so desired. All right, anything else on that? Linda, do you have anything else?
No, just, you know, I mean, it's very helpful to hear the concerns or the ways it could be heard, even if it's not what we intend. You know, like, are people gonna feel this is,
They're gonna,
And effort.
they're gonna feel like, oh, they want me to pay more money in permits and fees.
well, the permit, well, as far as state level, that we have no control over.
Yeah.
As far as town, the permit for the planning board is free. And
I think social media is a good free platform that they throw their own ads in the background, so you have a stable platform to do things on, which is nice, and a small website to back it up that somebody can get to for a directory is relatively easy to
Right.
create these days, especially when you hire somebody that's going to use AI to create it and then allow people to come in.
Right. Well, and if it's the way I was sort of imagining earlier is, okay, so let's say you have your yellow pages where someone has like a little box listing and you click on it and there's a drop down. So it would be their Facebook page, their website, you know, maybe if they have a business card, a scan of the business card, so that it then, when you're not clicking on it, it shoots up again so that it's not like looking at a whole page of ads, but it allows the business to provide the information that they want prospective customers to know about.
Perhaps a link to their own.
Exactly, to their
whatever they
Facebook page, to their website, so that it becomes sort of a portal into whatever media they already have about themselves, Facebook, other social media, and so on.
While you were talking about that, I put it in a search to Grok to ask how towns are promoting that, and they talked about search engine optimization with trying to get keywords in there
Yes.
so that it's bringing people
Yeah,
to the site.
exactly. And there are plugins for websites that will actually do that. They'll assess your search engine optimization to see how well you're doing and recommend where you can fix it. So absolutely, I mean, all of those tools would be really important.
Like where you see somebody like Stephen just start typing this stuff off the top of his head and putting paragraphs of it out, and I'm like, ooh, I wish I thought that fast.
Okay, are we ready to move on? All right, next thing on here is zoning ordinance section 2. In your packets, you have a thing about mixed-use zoning. Have you had you were given this last month. Have you had an opportunity to read over this and have any questions or concerns that I may be not able to answer? So this was taken from town of Plymouth. It's an explanation that was used for their mixed-use zoning. And it talks about what mixed-use zoning is. It's a mix of residential and commercial and/or industrial in a single district. Mixed zoning can take a variety of forms. And that's what we're discussing here. We're looking to do sustainable zoning within the community and to reflect what is already there so that it becomes more of a legalish area to do it. Where right now we have businesses in a commercial zone and residential's in a commercial zone and businesses in a residential, and it just goes back and forth. And then the change in the law says that you have to allow residents to be in all zones unless it is specifically stated that they cannot be in that zone. So that's something that we also may want to take a look at.
One thing though, I think you have to this is kind of an all-encompassing statement.
It is.
You don't want, it's kind of helter-skelter. It could be helter-skelter.
It could be.
I think we have to watch that, how we word it and monitor it.
So the proposal, if you go to the next document, is to create in section 2 of our zoning ordinance a mixed-use zone, or MU. It would be labeled as section C. So in section 2, we would add into Article 2, and then where we have commercial, zones 1 and 2, industrial, village residential, rural residential, Henley-Jawasset overlay, Squam overlay, and this is not the current one. This should have in here the flood zone overlay. So we will get that fixed. This would add into that mixed-use district. And the boundaries would be, the proposed boundaries, and this is all to be changed. A mixed-use district as shown on the adopted zoning map beginning at the Holderness Town line on Route 3 and 35, Route 3 and 25. It's Route 3 and 25. To Cottage Street on the right side of the road as you come into town. Then from Cottage Street to Main Street on both sides of the road. So that would be everything on the non-water side of Route 3 till you get to Cottage Street, where we have the, on the water side, we have,
River Street.
what?
River Street, across from River Street.
No, this would be closer to town, so you know where Cottage Street is?
Yeah.
So from Cottage Street, which is where the park starts, going into town would be mixed use. We've had auto repair shop in there, we've had a bicycle shop in there.
Fret shop.
The fret shop was in there. We've had different types of housing in there. So that would be a mixed-use zone to allow them to do that and continuing on the other side up to where Meredith Village is. West Street, and then West Street, from the beginning of West Street at Main Street to the end of the lot at West Street, which is town zoning map 2214-015. So that is currently designated as commercial and residential. So that would make the whole thing a mixed-use zone. So they could put in commercial, like that's where Burger King is. You got some houses there. You got
Storage.
you got some storage units. You got some land surveyors. You got houses mixed in with them. You got a motel, and then you have that's actually all commercial zoned, even where the houses are. And then you have the senior housing there, which is residential zone. Which is commercial zoned. Senior housing is in commercial zone. Then you get up to where Mr. Hiltz started to build his SCAR back in the 80s. And about halfway up, that becomes residential, up to the end of that lot. So this would turn all of that to a mixed-use zone, really reflecting what is already there. And then the intersection of Winona Road and 132 North at Main Street to the intersection of Main and Industrial Drive, so right over there, as a mixed use. Because again, we have houses, businesses, storefronts, everything. On the Holderness one, that would be 250 feet from the center line of the road to the property, to the 250 feet out, which is where most of the houses lie now, well, businesses and or houses. A map would be included with this. The general purpose of this district characteristic is the intent to guide growth while preserving the rural small town character, including the establishment of a mixed-use district with a single and multifamily housing and commercial establishments on a traditional village scale, which would foster pedestrian use, promote safe traffic patterns, reduce curb cuts, encourage shared parking and driveways wherever feasible and prudent. Within the mixed-use zone, a principal structure may in itself be mixed use. For example, a residential apartment or apartments may be located on the floor above the commercial establishment. The purpose of the district is to allow for increased density in a limited area while also reflecting a more nuanced understanding of the area's unique geographics. Provisions for frontage or secondary access roads are required in this district to serve better community standards and concerns for preserving scenic views and the attractive rural character, while still providing a workforce venue for mixed-use growth near the interchange of the state interstate and 993. So that's a broad thing for the entire area. there's still some development that will need to be taken into that. There's a land use thing here, so it would allow single-family dwellings, two-family dwellings, multi-family dwellings, accessory dwelling units. And some of accessory dwelling units would require a special exception. Cluster developments is a conditional use, which is already discussed in our zoning ordinance. Professional office buildings would be allowed. There may be some that would require a permitting. Banks, financial institutions, excluding drive-throughs, so we may or may not want to have drive-throughs in that area, excluding those that are already there, like Merrick Village, which makes sense. Commercial services, repair facilities, excluding drive-through. Again, all of this is stuff that we can change and do as we want to. Commercial, retail, wholesale, rental, trades, agricultural, agrarianism, accessory building units incidental to the primary structure. That could be something like somebody selling wood. We have a bunch of kids that do that. This allows them to do that. Home occupations, that may require a variance, but depending on what it is. Bed and breakfasts, restaurants, medical facilities, educational institutions like daycare facilities, which is a great need in this community and many others. And professional in businesses like banks, financial institutions, commercial repairs, most of the stuff I've already said. And then we would regulate how big of the building we want. The town would have to decide, how big of a building is acceptable in this area. And that may be like West Street, a much bigger building than what we would want on Route 3 and 25. Height as well as floor space. Yep. All things that we have to look at, think about, and decide as a community. And also number of parking spaces, something we need. Right now we require 2 spaces. There's been some law changes that we have to bring that down to 1.5 spaces per residential unit. I don't know how you get half a car into something, but I don't know. Anyways, then it goes on to talk about the setbacks, which are pretty much the same as what we currently have and everything. This document will be made available on the town webpage for people to look at and discuss. And I ask you to send your feedback in so that we have it, so that we can make an informed decision on your behalf. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and I think one of the things that we've talked some about this in the last meeting, but one of the things I think we're going to want to look at really carefully in all the potential uses is to troubleshoot, or are there loopholes that could let something come in that we actually don't want? So, for example, and I had mentioned this last time, congregate dwelling refers to things like state-funded, Section 8, HUD, and I think, when we were told that some projects came into the town because of loopholes, to me that's a possible loophole that we would want to close. So that would be one category that we might want to think long and hard about whether or not we include. So I think what would be helpful is, for example, multifamily dwelling, how many families? Those are the kinds of questions I think would be really helpful for us to look at very carefully, both what version of each category could really benefit us and which ones could open the door for something that, if we don't think it all through carefully, we could be opening the door to things we don't want.
Each one of these categories will have to have a definition attached to the back of the ordinance. We've seen that in many communities that's what has happened. In our community, In the past, that has been used against us because we have not defined stuff well, and sometimes some of our definitions are almost contradictory to some of the other definitions with regard to dwelling and residence. So, as Linda said, the more eyes we get to look at this, the better document we will have. Our intention is that for November, we will have a final document. That document will then go to public hearings in December and to the town warrant for your vote in February and at the deliberative session in March for your vote at the polls. So look at, let us know.
In other words, you all got homework.
The only other thing, well, I have two other things left down here. The master plan, that's really what we've been talking about the whole night. All of this feeds into that, which will then feed into the final version of stuff that we're going to be doing. Jane is filed some stuff that was going to get us some money so that we can pay for the master plan. That is all looking good through Housing Champions. We are working with Housing Champions and with Invest in Hampshire to get both of those things accomplished. And it looks good so far. The last thing that I have here is in your packets, you have a working on a planning board webinar. So the next planning board webinar is going to be on July 16th from noon to 1. These are regular recurring webinars. This topic is, So this session is for new planning board members as well as veterans who want a refresher course on how recent laws affect planning board actions and decisions. This session will review statutory duties in planning boards, including subdivisions and site plan approvals, innovative land use controls, and off-site, and will include the review and types of planning board applications. I encourage each of you to go to this webinar, take it. Once you have taken one of these courses, however, could you please send an email to Jane saying that you have taken it so she can log your education, because on Housing Champions and all of that, we get extra points for you doing that. And it helps us to get more grant money, and we like that.
This is something you do online.
Yep, it's all online. You can do it wherever you want. Public is welcome to attend as well. Become educated. We always have openings. We're glad to have more people. All right. Our next meeting is July 17th in this room. It will, at this point, we have, I believe, 2 or 3 applications which will be before us, one of which I believe will be Mill Pond. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss tonight? Anyone?
Can I just thank everybody who's worked so hard to pull stuff together, whether it's the mixed-use stuff or the data that Jenny pulled together? Just want to extend thanks.
Yes,
That's a
thank
lot of
you
work.
very much for what you did. That is going to be so important as we move down the road for the master plan and stuff.
So most people didn't know that the Mill Pond project was not coming up tonight. Is that correct? I just looked on the website. It doesn't say it was canceled.
We didn't know until this morning.
Right, but my fear is that there's very few people here.
That may or may not be the case. I do not know the answer. But I don't believe it got
And
pretty.
a lot of work is going into trying to weigh these things out
Yeah.
for the community.
Yeah, the more people we have at these meetings, the better the outcome will be. So,
They'll all be complaining about it on the.
Oh, go to Facebook, they'll tell you how horrible everybody is.
Is that the word?
Yeah, that better is
So, if he doesn't mind, sitting in the table behind you is the gentleman who will become the new town manager in a few days.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
His name is Ron. He's very nice.
Ron,
Beard.
My first day.
We're all very excited.
We're very excited.
Nobody's more excited than CP, however, I can guarantee that.
Probably ought to take that guy to lunch.
All right. No one has anything else? Time being 19:50, I close the planning board meeting.